I love this quote that the director of Severance put down where he says, but there are certain things we learn as humans like empathy and self-worth that I think we're often discouraged from bringing to the workplace to our own detriment. The less of ourselves we bring to work, the easier we are to exploit or rope into immoral practices.
Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things. Hey everyone, so as you know, TikTok's probably gone. So if you want to continue seeing the content that we're going to be creating, in our bio, you'll see a link to all of our social media accounts. If you wouldn't mind, please feel free to follow us on our additional accounts in the case that TikTok does get banned. We can still continue to have our great conversations that we've had. We really appreciate the support that you guys have had with us over the last 2 years, and we want to continue this for many more. Thanks. See you all.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we are going to be discussing Severance Season 1 in anticipation of Severance Season 2 finally arriving next...
This Friday. This Friday.
January 17.
Oh, man. It came back so quickly, bro. Like, it felt like it was just yesterday where we had Season 1, right? Like,
we've been waiting such a long time.
Just for a reference, there will be spoilers in this episode. So if you haven't watched it, I don't recommend that you watch this episode before watching Severance Season 1.
It's such a good show. Like, go watch it. I just have to say that I feel like this show is such a great example of showing, not telling.
Yes.
Because most people, the first time watching it, went in not knowing much. At least I did. Within like the first, I want to say like 20 or so minutes, you kind of have an idea of what's happening, but they don't really break it down for you. I just really like that because you're putting so much trust in the intellect of your audience.
Yes.
And I appreciate that.
Another thing that Severance does well is the characters are intelligent. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that like they're not Einstein level intelligence, but TV shows sometimes you have to just like turn on your disbelief hat and just assume that like, all right, I'm going to ignore the fact that like common sense in this moment didn't kick in for that person just so that I can enjoy it. Uh-huh. But like there were moments where I was like, oh, I'm glad you guys thought about this. Like when the Innies go out into the real world, they're thinking about what are we going to do because we don't know what's going to happen once we, get like turned on. We don't know what situation we're going to be in. We don't know which people. So I loved when Mark was like, find someone that you think you can trust, or even something as simple as the minute he came in there, he caught that, his boss is there. Can you excuse me? I need to run to the bathroom. Gives himself time to like get his composure, or minor things like how's our baby? Like he says to his sister, right?
To try and pick up on things.
Yes.
He just didn't know that he was using a fake name.
But little things like that, that's where I'm like, oh, you guys thought of everything. Mm-hmm. The directors for Severance thought of everything, and I'm just impressed by all of that. I
feel like they convey a lot in very little things. So like in the first episode, when you see Mark going down the elevator and you see like the subtle changes in his disposition, which also like credit to the actors and Adam Scott, because there are slight differences between Mark's presentation in his severed form and in his Outie. Yeah. I'm gonna just have to use the weird words of Innie and Outie. Sorry.
I'm just gonna say severed form. I can't. It's just...
His Innie and his Outie. But like you see like his posture is slightly different. He walks a little bit faster when he's at work versus when he's out of work.
Yeah.
How he holds his face is slightly different because he doesn't have all of the depression and baggage.
The weight of life.
That Outie Mark has, which I feel like is a testament to the actors portraying these characters, and also again to the directors and writers who thought of those types of things, because even that in that first episode communicates something to you about what's happening. Yeah. Like that's before you really know. There is a point when somebody, I think it's Milkshake, kind of does explain what's happening, because they give us like a little flashback to when Helly got the procedure done. And so then they do eventually kind of just like explain it to you. Watching Helly go through the process of like basically the orientation process, when she's like running in and out of the stairwell, like all of those things, they like help you put the pieces together yourself. So that by the time they do have Milchick explain it to you, it's like it's confirmation, but it's not exposition.
Another thing that I thought of just with the intelligence of it all, when the Severed go back into the real world, little things like Irving was in this car driving, but he had never driven before. But you could see it was like muscle memory was kind of kicking in. Like he was kind of like reminding himself, which sort of tells you a little bit that like the normal person's like consciousness is connected to like the severed person. Because one, he's seeing all the paintings and like something he's remembering something there. And obviously the same thing when he's in the severed office, he's seeing the paint dripping down. But yeah, I thought that was kind of clever. Like he's trying to remember, okay, wait, this lever does this, and then it's like it just his memory jogs back in,
like it kicks back in. Yeah. There's a lot of that in that show that I really appreciated. I also, of course, so many parallels to real life work. Okay.
So we're getting into this already. Okay.
I mean, because it comes up literally in like at the very beginning of the show.
Yeah.
I really like how they kind of juxtapose the work environment to the outside world, at least through Mark's perspective. Because whenever we are with Outie Mark, it's dark, it's dreary, you don't see sunshine. Okay. The color grading is like almost grayscale. It's extremely depressing. When they're at Lumon on the severed floor, it's very bright, but it's artificial.
Yeah.
Like the colors are brighter, but it still doesn't convey that true feeling of happiness.
Like a fake LED light kind of vibes.
I mean, it's the freaking, what are those lights called? I forgot what those bulbs are called, but they're like famously terrible. Those overhead workplace lights that everybody has. But even that, it just does such a good job of showing like that really is kind of how it feels when you work a very involved job that takes up your entire day. It does feel like you never see sun. It does feel like your life outside of that workplace is kind of just dreary.
Yeah.
And just preparation for having to go do it all again.
Yeah, I mean, Helly even says that where she was like, a weekend just passed and I'm doing this all over again.
Yes, I thought about that too, because it's like, I understand that it's for the characters, it's very literal, like they literally just blink. But also, like, how many times do you hear people say that?
Monday
like,
already.
I blinked and I'm back here again.
Yeah.
Like nothing happens in the in-between because nobody has the time or energy to do anything in the in-between. You just prepare to have to go back and do it all over again.
Yeah.
Like there's so many parts of the severed people's experiences that still resonate. Yeah. Even with people who like obviously we're not severed, but like it's such a good way to explore how it feels.
Yeah. I feel like the reason why Severance hit off the way that it did, in my opinion, is because it came out around the COVID era where people were having a lot of deep conversations on like, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? Where do I want to work? Where can I find value? And where will I feel valued in the workplace? I love this quote that the director of Severance put down where he says, but there are certain things we learn as humans like empathy and self-worth that I think we're often discouraged from bringing to the workplace to our own detriment. The less of ourselves we bring to work, the easier we are to exploit or rope into immoral practices. You saw a lot with Cobell, you saw a lot with Milchick, same thing. But I think you also saw a little bit of that with Mark also, with the way that he had to force himself and convince himself that he was not hurting, that Petey was gone. The director also says, but also we need that separation in order to not lose ourselves entirely. The reason why it sort of brought the COVID conversation up for me is that the way that Severance is sort of presented is that the people who are severed get to essentially live their life to the fullest with no real pauses in between it all, right? You see examples of like, oh, I don't have to go through pregnancy, or if I'm working all the time, then I can like be fully present for my family, for my daughter, for my son. Like we saw that with Dylan, we saw it with Petey in his funeral as well. And it did kind of show a little bit of like the privilege that exists in that with like essential workers that had to go in during peak COVID. They didn't have that luxury of like self-discovery and finding yourself and really processing like the existential angst everybody was going through. That wasn't an option that they had. Versus like a lot of us, we were able to work from home and we were able to like essentially protect ourselves from getting sick. But I love that the director was like, but we need that separation in order to not lose ourselves entirely. And I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling a little bit of that when I was working from home when COVID first started, because it's like work and life did kind of blur together. And I remember the first couple of weeks, I was like, bro, this is great. But then after all, and I'll admit this is a very like subjective experience. Some people thrive in the, you know, working from home environment for like 5 days a week. But I realized that like, oh, I don't think I set up the proper boundaries. Yes. In order for it to not affect, like, cause I was working. Sometimes I was doing work on my bed, or I was doing work like right before I went to sleep, or like my boss would send me an email or a text and I would be responding to things in hours that I wouldn't be doing under normal circumstances. So I like that, like, there's so many areas that the directors of this show are trying to get across, but it's not a singular point. There's multiple values about what a healthy work environment is that they're trying to convey for us to get.
I feel like this show is more of an example of what an extremely unhealthy work environment is. I don't think it necessarily provides answers for what a healthy work environment is. I would agree. I think it just gives non-examples without actually providing the alternative, which is fine. I'm enjoying the show.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get to it eventually. It's only one season.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Yeah.
The point that he was making about how the less of yourself you bring to work, the more easily you are to exploit.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I was thinking about. I was thinking about how for so many, it's not just in corporate America. I know that the show kind of centers on that type of like corporate 9 to 5, but I think this is very, very true of jobs that are like cause focused, like education, the medical industry, if you work for like a nonprofit,
social work.
Yeah, like social workers, if you work for the government. I think those types of jobs also have this, because your ideal worker, especially in that type of environment, is a person who leaves as much of their outside life out of it and is just completely zeroed in and focused on the work.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a phrase that they use a lot in in education. They'll be like, you know, as we're doing this work, why do you do the work? I don't know if they use it in like other fields. I don't know. As like the more dedicated you are to that, the more they can like extract from you, because they'll always justify it with the cause that you're supporting, right? Like as a teacher, it took me a very long time to learn to like just turn it off and like to stop working and to leave people on red until work hours start again, and to just let it be, because you always come back to like, oh, but you're doing it for the kids. Like it's student centered. It's for a good cause. And it's really, really easy in those types of work environments to get people to work until they can't anymore. Like to literally just burn people out, because they just won't stop. But you see that in the way that certain characters on the show kind of find meaning. This has a lot to do with the types of people that Lumon is recruiting to the job.
Oh, for sure.
They're definitely
exploiting. They're taking advantage of people's pain.
Yeah, they're definitely doing the suburb
100%.
Their Outies problems are directly related to the ways that their Innie seeks like some sort of solace to stay sane, right?
Yeah.
Like Mark is clearly lonely as an Outie, right? He lost his wife. And when we see him outside of work, unless he is with his sister, you can see that he feels alone even in the presence of other people.
Yeah.
And so his Innie, the thing that keeps Innie Mark going is that he convinces himself that Lumon is the source of his community.
Yeah.
He sees these people as family. He was really close to Petey. He kind of tries to indoctrinate Helly into that same mindset of like, you get to be a part of this now. They have the team pictures and the, you know, and so that's kind of how he convinces himself that like this is all worth it. And that's how Lumon is able to get him to be dedicated to this. Then you have Irv, and Irv is like his outer self we don't know a lot about, but clearly he is seeking meaning somehow. He's painting the exact same picture over and over and over and over again. He lives alone with his dog. Irv is the only person that when he goes into his outie form is completely alone and never connects with another person. And so that guy, when he goes in, he finds meaning in like the mythology of Lumon, which is another thing that like corporations and nonprofits really do mythologize their histories and their founding stories. I think startups do this too. That like inspiring story to like really get you on board. But you can see with Irv, like it really works. He just completely buys into this idea of Lumon as, even if he doesn't understand what they do, as this legacy of greatness and great people with these idyllic values that you really want to live up to, and that's what keeps him going. The most mysterious one for me was Dylan, but on rewatch, I'm like, no, like you see that Dylan is the person who's the most obsessed with his outie. Like he's constantly wondering about his outie, making up like these kind of grandiose stories about who his outie
creating
is.
The lore behind who is. Yeah.
And the same way that like all of them have these very clear ways of coping, when those things become destroyed is when they all break. And you see that for Dylan. The thing that breaks him is when he actually gets to see what it's like for his outie and realizes what his outie has, a son, and then they strip that away from him. That's what breaks him. Mark, you see that it's like, oh, he had, I feel like it starts with the loss of Petey, but he pushes it aside.
Sure.
But it's Helly when she tries to unalive herself that he's like, oh, actually Lumon is not giving me community. It's putting my community at risk. It's stripping them away from me.
Yeah.
And then you see with Irv, it's when he bonds with Bert. Over that same thing.
Yeah.
Over that dedication to this company, and they take it away.
Yeah.
Like when all of them realize the thing that they've been finding meaning in Lumon is actually what Lumon's taking from them. That's when they're like, all right, let's go.
Another quote that the Severance director mentioned, he says, when he's asked about like what Severance is supposed to mean, he says it's about workers reclaiming power, which is obviously a brutal ongoing human struggle, but workers are extremely powerful. And I think solidarity is one of the biggest challenges in that, especially when those in power try to divide us in the ranks. A non-healthy work environment will use that supervisor or that VP or that boss role to make sure that people just fall in line. And you saw that portrayed so much.
Yes. And you also see how easy it is to do to them because they have no meaning outside of this place.
Right.
This is their entire world, so it's very easy to manipulate them to fall in line.
Yeah.
And that's true of a lot of people in real life. If your job is your life and you have no real meaningful community or purpose outside of it, it's very easy for them to get you to do what they want because you are afraid of losing it.
And I think on a societal level, we're losing the other outlets to create community that like our parents and grandparents had.
Yeah.
Like things are becoming a lot more isolated. What's there's that term?
Third places.
Third places, yes. Like we've sort of lost that, which makes it understandable for people to then use work as that third place. And corporations and companies, they know that, which is why they try to build that lore up, which then makes it easier for you to be like, well, I'm doing it for a righteous cause. But in the end, like you're just getting exploited.
They also explore the way that workplaces use, and honestly, this is just like a fundamental tenet of capitalism.
Yeah.
But competition.
Oh, yeah.
Competition. And then essentially what that competition breeds is just like an innate distrust of other people because you believe that there's not room for everybody. And you see that in the way that macro data refinement team feels about the O&D team, Bert's team.
And vice versa, honestly.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, it was quite literally because they were spinning stories of a violent uprising between the two, which is insane.
Yeah.
But like that type of idea that like you cannot trust the people working beside you because they are in direct competition to you and thus they are a threat to you is something that I think probably more so in like corporate jobs we see a lot that prevents people from being transparent about things that would probably help them collectively if they were honest. It's like how it's considered unprofessional to discuss salary.
Yeah.
But it's like when people sit down and discuss salary, it's helpful because you see, you need the comparison to understand if you are being mistreated.
Yeah.
But people spin these stories about it being dangerous to you, about you putting your own well-being at risk if you're too open and forthright with what you are making. Because there's this idea that there's not enough for all of us when 9 times out of 10 there is.
Yeah.
But we have to like get over that hump of distrust and see that these are the people that are on our side and it's not these higher ups that are claiming to have our back. Oh, the other thing I was thinking about too, one of the things that you really see the workers of Lumon, the 7 workers of Lumon struggling with is like, it's extremely difficult, honestly, quite frankly, like impossible for them to advocate for themselves because there's no true avenue that is built for that. This made me think about how people think about HR. You get told this story and this idea about HR that like they're there for you and that if something happens to you in your workplace, those are the people that you can go to. That's your avenue for advocacy, for self-advocacy and self-protection. But what we know about HR is that their priority is actually to protect the company. And sometimes your priorities and the company's priorities might align. And so maybe that means that you are also protected too, but not always. We really are in a position where there actually is not a true means for us to advocate for ourselves because the things that they present to us as supposedly fulfilling that role do not. There is actually no design in corporate America that is meant to protect workers. In Severance, they are literally incapable because they are so isolated. They are unable to reach out to anybody who could possibly help them. And the people who present themselves as being on their side are not, right? Like, and that becomes more and more true as the season goes on and as they start to step more and more outside of the boundaries of what is expected of them in their role at that workplace.
Well, this is why over the last 8 or 9 years, we've seen such a large push for unionizing the workplace. And I understand that there's a lot of conversations that come with unions and what that could potentially lead in a lot of different scenarios. But the fervor that you're sensing is because you have a lot of people that are like, well, who else can I turn to outside of the person working next to me? Because it doesn't feel like it can be my supervisor or the person above him, or sometimes it doesn't feel like they can go to HR. And based off of what you were saying, the vibe that they're getting from the people who they work for and the people who they're supposed to go to feel like they are there prioritizing the organization over the people running the organization or making it run. I mean, we're still seeing the way that conversations have gone with places like Amazon or Starbucks and so on and so forth. And one of the things that it sort of reminded me of with Harmony Cobell, the boss, with her character specifically, I love when the Severance director talked about how a lot of workspaces use divisive tactics to create that division in that workplace, even amongst the person that's working closest in proximity to you, like your immediate supervisor. One of the things that I found interesting was that they chose the perfect backstory for her because of how much she believes in the value in Lumon in particular. Like she almost on like an occult level. But one of the things that I found interesting, and I do feel like they were intentionally writing her this way, is that her life outside of Lumon isn't that great either.
She doesn't have a life outside of Lumon.
Right.
She's working all the time.
Yeah, but I guess the point that I'm saying is even with the fact that she is a supervisor, there is nothing tangible there to show for it. They have not showed us anything that this has paid off for her.
No, I would agree. Like, even if she is making more money, she's obviously not able to do much with it.
Yeah. And then she gets fired, essentially.
Yeah. Her character is really interesting to me because for a character like Irv or Bert, right, who are also really, really bought into like the myth of this company and like the legend of all the CEOs and honestly like the religion of it all, it makes sense because they don't know anything else. Like they don't have any context outside of it. So things that to us are like weird and outlandish, to them obviously are not, because they don't really have any other context. But she's so fascinating to me because she's so bought into it also, but I don't understand why.
Yeah.
Like she's not somebody who should be as easily manipulated because she knows it's all, like she knows the truth of Lumon. I'm really fascinated to understand what motivates her just a little bit more.
And it's also her loyalty is unwavering, but the second time around, I have sensed like there is some fascination she does have for Mark outside of just the observing.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff that she was doing, even some of the observation stuff, she wasn't supposed to.
Right. Another thing that I was thinking about, one of the examples that you brought up, I know this is like a completely different show, but I actually thought of The Office when we were watching this, because I remember there were a couple of episodes where they talked about unionizing even in the office. Michael was the one that kind of went down to, you could tell he was kind of caught in like a weird place. Jan comes out and just shuts it all down. But then later on in the series, because, unionizing isn't really working, part of the story that doesn't really get discussed as much is they get understaffed. And Daryl has to be the one to pick up some of the slack that's going on. And then he goes to Michael and he's like, all right, well, because we lost some of our workers, I'm working multiple jobs and I feel like I should be getting compensated for it. He shows Michael what he suggests and Michael kind of scoffs it and he's like, I don't even get paid that much. And then finally, Michael shows him his pay stub. And then Michael realizes that he's getting underpaid also.
I
And
remember
then
this.
It opens the floodgates to like, Michael had been so bought into the love of being the supervisor for this job. And he loved working for Dunder Mifflin. But like, he's a victim too, And so I know the show did it a lot in a much funnier way than Severance did, but the parallels I felt like were very spot on. The immediate reaction of once solidarity starts to creep in amongst workers that are exploited, the first place that that companies go to is that immediate supervisor. Like they, in many instances, are used as like a policing agency, essentially, above everything else.
I really like that connection. I did not think about that at all. I really like that. Oh, the meaningless incentives. Whenever like Milkshake would come in with like the little cart and they'd play the little music, it finally clicked for Dylan after he, saw his son and realized like what I could be having and what I could be asking for and what I've been settling for this whole time, because he had been the most gung-ho about the doggone waffle party, okay? Like he was the person that was like, I'm gonna get my little finger,
get my perks,
whatever the little finger thing is. Like he was like, I'm going to go for this. But when he realizes like what he's been getting and asking for and what he's missing out on, it just makes him angry when they come in with the cart and playing the music and the little devil days and all this stuff, and he's like, no, this is meaningless. Get out of my face.
It's also a little bit the way that the directors shot that scene. It starts off semi-harmless, like you kind of eye roll, but like it felt somewhat genuine because other people starting to dance. But for Dylan, Milkshake starts to kind of dance behind him a little bit, and the lighting in that scene goes red, and it starts to feel like almost like devilish behind, taunting you in your ear, and then he finally cracks because I think it realizes like, yo, these things are not just meaningless, but it also feels a little patronizing to me as a human as well. One of the things that I noticed earlier on is that like I love the fact that with all of the money and wealth that Lumon has, the technology in the work environment is actually like pretty pedestrian. Like the computers are like, those feel like 1999 Macintosh kind of computers. They've got like old shredders, old printers. You know, like everything there, like the carpet in the space looks like it's still in like 1970s, all of it. But the technology in every other space that's related to security or controlling them feels like it's kind of like top of the line a little bit. Like the elevator, when they try to escape the Severance world, picks up on literally any kind of coding. You draw something on your hand, the elevator is going to pick it up. You write a note, it's going to pick it up. Or even, obviously, the technology of the Severance itself, or the chip, or the security office. All of that shows that, like, what they are prioritizing with their funds tells you what they feel is the most important for them as a company.
They care about surveilling them. Well, not even that, because that was another thing too. That was like, they give them the impression that they are being surveilled and watched all the time, but in actuality, they're not.
No.
I feel like that's also just such a... Because so much of people's obedience to their workplace, okay, like you have the people that are like genuinely like really gung-ho about their jobs, okay, you know, those types of people, okay. Everybody has at least one in their place of work, okay. But then there's also a lot of people who don't feel that way, but they are afraid of the consequences of stepping out of line. What the show Severance shows, that I think is also true in real life, is that a lot of times those consequences, those fear tactics are bluffs. They are bluffing, because at the end of the day, they need you more than you need them.
Yeah.
At least as a collective. Maybe not you as like an individual. Okay. Like the collective.
Yeah. Sit down, be humble. I'm kidding.
I feel like that's also like a thing that is hindering to worker solidarity that people need to break through, is like, you need to stop fearing the consequences enough to understand that like they can't get rid of all of us.
Yeah.
That's what makes strikes possible. When people decide like, if all of us really, really do this and we all stand together in this, we will win, because they can't get rid of all of us. The only thing that threatens us is if some of us don't get on board because we're afraid. But if everybody does it, we'll get what we want.
Immediately watching Severance the second time around, the first thought that came into my head, I was like, oh, this is like 1984. Like
the novel?
Yes, like extremely dystopian. I went and looked it up, and the book was one of the inspirations. Like, yes, it tracks completely. Primarily because so much of what creates the emotional catalyst for the severed workers is when they come in contact with some version of art. Whether it's with like Mark, his brother-in-law, the book, they're reading different quotes, and then it starts to give them ideas. Whether it's with Irving and the paintings and what it starts to mean for him afterwards and whatnot. Or just like little hints, like one of the parties when Milkshake asked Helly, what kind of music do you want? She says defiant jazz, which I just felt that's a little on the nose with where they're going with it. Books and information, things coming from the outside world are banned. Like you can't read things from there. And so they're doing it in secrecy. And I remember one of the quotes, like the book is sort of seen as like somewhat of like, it's a little over the top, but he did have that line where he was like, if you find yourself being forced to conform to a system, you must ask yourself if you should change or if it's the system itself. And I'm like, yeah, like once they start to consume literature, a paradigm shift takes place in their mind, which is why I feel like not everyone may fully grasp the fear that a lot of people are having with books being banned and shows being banned, or the push for the like woke or anti-DEI stuff, is that historically speaking, our country has always been pushed in particular directions through art. And most instances, it's the marginalized groups that are using art to tell their story. And if you start limiting those spaces, that's how you get the fear of that dystopian world that we had been warned about for decades. Like 1984 is not some new book. I love the little detail that they showed when they're about to go in and Mark's about to give that little speech from probably some quote that he heard from the book, and Dylan finishes it. Yeah. Like they're all in tune, and their convictions are all aligned because art brought them all to the same place.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. This was something from a Vox article that I was reading when they were reviewing Severance. And they were like, Severance is a roadmap for organizing a revolution in progress, and it begins and ends with caring about your fellow worker, who in turn cares about you. And perfect.
The risks for them are so much greater than the risks for us.
Yeah.
Because even if they succeed, maybe it's kind of like they cease to exist.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. I've actually been thinking that for a long time. Like, what is the resolution in this show? Terrifying.
Apparently, they're already writing out season 3, so we're winning as.
The only thing I can see is like reintegration, because then they both get to exist, like the
fuse
memories
them together.
Yeah, but
that's going to bring a lot of questions and concerns. I can tell you.
Oh,
that.
for sure.
Different feelings. Like you heard on the news that one of them was like they had a little office bay.
Like she got pregnant.
Yes.
Well, the thing is, they don't clarify it isn't an office bay, or did something happen to her?
Oh, like
was it abused? Because that was my first thought when I first started watching Severance. I was like, truthfully, the scariest and worst case scenario is that somebody is being horrifically abused in the workplace, and there's absolutely no way for anyone to know or do anything.
Bro, that just sent a chill down my spine. Like, what the heck?
That's what I thought of when the person was like, they came out pregnant.
Bruh.
We don't know. It could be nothing. It could be what you were saying, or it could be something else.
Oh my goodness. I think all of the actors are incredible, but I'm sorry. John Turturro stands out to me so much. There's the scene when he finally convinces himself, when Irving convinces himself to go to visit Bert. This is for the last time, and then it's revealed that Bert is retiring. The amount of emotion that Turturro was able to convey, so much sadness and confusion and betrayal, that is like peak OG acting. That's like years of experience that you've had to go through in order to know how to convey something so good. And I feel like my love for John Turturro as an actor, I feel like I need to finally name how much I actually appreciate him, because I feel like he's one of those actors that I forget how much I love, if that makes sense. And he's like, anytime he's in a role, he bodies it, whether it's Severance or Plot Against America, even to like what's the one, is it The Night Of? Or even like the goofy ones when he was like in Transformers. It doesn't matter, he just shines out amongst everyone else. And I kind of want to put him in like the category of actors that Christopher Nolan calls like good luck charms. Like you put them in and it brings something to the set, it brings something to the cast and to the directors, and it also brings something to the audience. When you see that actor, you're like, oh, this is gonna be a banger. This is gonna be a banger. Like Michael Caine, Denzel, or Morgan Freeman. I want to put Turturro in that list because he, as an actor, I feel like has never missed, bro. And the way that they're talking about how he performs in season 2 of Severance, they're like, he might be grabbing an Emmy or a Golden Globe, bro. Anyways, y'all, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'd love to hear what you all think about Severance season 1. Are you excited about Severance season 2? What are your thoughts, your theories, your ideas? Let us know in the comments below. And we're excited to get on a new journey with you all, with a new TV show that we're all excited for. So can't wait to have more conversations with you guys. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.